Hi guys, thanks for joining me. Today's case, I'm just going to tell you, is absolutely devastating. Don't get me wrong. Like in any situation, there are always seeds of hope, and I'm not going to deny that there are seeds of hope within this, but nonetheless, it is just absolutely devastating to comprehend, acknowledge, and somehow have to accept that there are these human beings that exist amongst us who are literally pure evil, in my particular opinion. I know that psychologists and therapists and mental health workers and other psychiatrists, etc., believe that evil isn't necessarily something that exists, but I do not happen to share that opinion. I think that evil does exist. I think that great good exists as well, and altruism of the highest level. But with respect, I think that hell can sometimes walk this earth, like the devil is free here, and it's incarnate in some people. And I promise you, after listening to today's case, you'll agree with me. To those of you who are new to my channel, if you keep returning here a few times and you're thinking to yourself, well, I do like the content, why don't you give me a like and also subscribe, get your notifications on so you don't miss my episodes. You'll always get 2 crime full-length deep dives here on my channel every single week. If you like my content, you can get more of it on Patreon and also YouTube membership. Also, just to give myself a shout out, my Killer Couples tour starts in the UK in the next few weeks. So if you do want to catch me at a big theatre in the UK this year, talking killer couples, and in fact some of next year, you can do that. So let's talk about today's true crime case. So on the 13th of November 2015, Megan Hiatt, who was a 22-year-old woman from Jacksonville, Florida, literally survived the most horrific and brutal act of violence that I've actually heard of, genuinely. What she went through was singly something that you can almost find impossible to imagine, let alone to actually endure. And in fact, to have to reflect on the fact that you experienced it, because that's what happens in trauma. Those individuals who go through these moments that very few of us can even imagine experiencing, they don't just go through the moment, it's the collateral of what happens after that moment. That is a lifelong journey to hopeful healing, essentially. But this crime doesn't just involve Megan. It involves her 5-month-old twin daughters, and it also involves her father. And what plays out is a crime that occurs because of an abusive partner, Gawain Wilson. When I tell you that Megan endured unimaginable trauma in the attack that genuinely left her horrifically injured, it, like I said, doesn't really describe the totality of the experience. You know, these are words, but when you actually put this into the context of a lived experience, it is too terrible to even comprehend. So let's talk about Megan Rose Hiatt. She was born on the 15th of October 1993. Her parents were Travis and Melissa Hiatt. She also has a twin brother, James Tyler Hiatt. And apparently when the twins were young, they were absolutely inseparable. I think that twins often share a very special relationship, whether they're non-identical or identical. There's just something about being that same age. When we go into the school system, for example, we start getting used to the idea that it's not cool to hang around with kids that are younger than us. So even if we have siblings, it can really impact on our relationships, just that experience of becoming an individual surrounded by peers of your age. But when you're a twin, obviously you remain in that situation with your twin throughout your life. So it makes sense that they were inseparable. And they were also raised in a very religious household, so they were members of the Church of the Latter-day Saints that other people refer to as Mormons. But understandably, if you are actually connected to the Church of the Latter-day Saints, you are expected to behave in a certain way that is becoming, shall we say, in a deep faith in God. Now, things change when Megan and James are 12 years old because their parents decide that they're going to get a divorce. And it's challenging, isn't it? When you're a kid, particularly of 12 years of age, you're just about to start puberty or you're going through puberty, you've got all your peer relationships going on, there's a lot of pressure at school and so on and so forth, and then parents that have kind of felt like sure things. And let's be clear, even when children live in households where their parents are arguing, very rarely do the kids believe that that's going to lead to a breakup. So it can be really quite catastrophic for a child to go through that experience. And one of the things that they really struggled with was the living between two houses. Don't get me wrong, it obviously demonstrates that both parents are trying to work effectively as co-parents. They're wanting to actually spend time with their kids. It's not as if one is abandoning their children here, but that splitting time between two houses is challenging for kids. And ultimately, Megan decided that she wanted to live with her dad full time, and actually so did her brother. And the reason for that is that both of them felt that it gave them more stability. And Megan said that she was always a daddy's girl, so it isn't a surprise, of course, that she'd rather live with him. I was also a daddy's girl, and without a shadow of a doubt, if my parents had split up, I wouldn't have been seen for dust at my mother's address. I would have been with my dad. Even if he hadn't wanted me, I'd have been like, you try getting me out of the boot of this car. By the way, I'm not suggesting that my father ever put me in the boot of his car. It's a lie. On one occasion, I asked to go in the boot of his car. It was a particular time when, let's say, parenting was different than in our modern day, and I really enjoyed going over those bumps in the back of the car. My brother, not so. He found the boot quite scary, but he should not have elected to go in it with me. I'm just saying it. I'm just saying it. A lot of you who are my age, you'll relate to such times. Same as when our fathers would allow us to sit on their knees and drive the car. They'd operate the gears, we'd operate the steering. Not safe, but a lot of fun at the time. Now, Megan didn't have an easy time at high school. One of the things that she suffered from was bullying. And one of the reasons for that is that she was actually born with a cleft palate. And she was also diagnosed with a hearing disorder, and that meant that she had to wear hearing aids. And we want to pretend, don't we, with kids, that they're all super kind, on the whole, children are so nice. No, they're not. At school, children are often just trying to survive. They're running the gauntlet. And so, if you have something distinct or different about you, you are going to be someone who likely stands out more. So many children will think, well, pick on that person because that will mean that I'm not getting picked on. And unfortunately, we see that play out time and time again at school. So for her, it was an isolating experience. And also, if you think about having hearing aids because you have a problem with your hearing, it means that communication is going to be less simple for you. And I talk real quick. If you think about being at school surrounded by peers and all of the noise that comes from that situation, then trying to differentiate the words that are coming to you from a particular teacher or another peer, it's going to be more challenging for you. So that's going to make you feel different as well. And again, it's going to add to that sense of isolation. And when we feel that sense of isolation, often we're looking for something real important in our life, which is connection. We're looking at being seen and noticed and appearing visible to another human being. And whilst that's wonderful on one level, because of course we should want to be visible to another human being, we should want to be connected to somebody who sees the best in us, it can also mean that we're vulnerable. Because it can mean that we are desperate to find somebody who makes us feel special. And the problem with that is that predators are very good at least initially making you feel special. Now, from 18 to 21, Megan almost always worked 3 jobs, and she went to college full time. So we're talking about somebody who is dedicated, she's ambitious, and even though she's had these issues in her life, she's not letting them hold her back at all. Now, in 2014, she meets Wilson. Now, she's 20 at this point, and she's looking to connect. She creates an account on Plenty of Fish dating website, and a man named Gawain Wilson, whose nickname was Rush, connects with her. Now, Wilson actually grew up in a small community in northern Jamaica. It's where his parents were, and they were very respected elders in that area. And so that introduces us to him growing up in an environment where respect is something he just expects. His parents are respected. His blueprint of growing up in that experience will be, well, I expect that people will treat me similar to my parents, so just bear that in mind. Now, a family friend of Wilson described Ricardo Garrick as a really quiet young man. Apparently he enjoyed cricket, he apparently excelled in school, he had a lot of friends, and he was brought up in a middle-class community of around 8,000 people. He and his siblings, which included at least one sister, were apparently always incredibly dressed. They were immaculate in their presentation. And Ricardo actually said he was a really nice, gentle young man. He was entrusted by his family to do a lot of stuff. He was never the type of person to get in trouble. You saw something special in that little boy. So it sounds like Wilson's beginnings were positive. He's excelling academically, he's respected in his community, he's popular with his peers. That should bode incredibly well for his future. But as we know, the boy does not always reflect the man. There used to be a saying that said, show me the boy at 7 years of age and I'll show you the man. That's just BS. There are traits to who the individual is at that age, but so many things can happen that interject and interfere with your development that actually you can be a wholly different person as a child to who you are at maybe 25 years of age. But it bodes well initially. And Wilson's parents are really strict, especially his mother, so he's given some pretty clear boundaries. Now, Wilson comes to the United States. This is after he graduates from high school. And again, it's going really well. He joins the US Navy in 2008 and he's an aircraft mechanic. So super qualified, super efficient at his job. And he spent much of his career in Jacksonville. He actually got several awards for his work, which again, this demonstrates a kind of standout capacity of this individual, at least at this moment in time. And according to Navy officials, he'd never been disciplined. Now, a lot of us will never have been disciplined in our jobs, but again, it just evidences that what's not happening at work is an individual who, at least there, has poor impulse control and gets himself into hot water. He can hold down a job, he can do so well that he gets awarded particular certificates and awards, and he's an individual that, to all intents and purposes, stands out for all the right reasons. And so understandably, you'd imagine that if you are looking at dating profiles and you come across somebody who seems to be such a stand-up guy, he's going to be attractive. Now, according to his dating profile, he said on it that he spent most of his life between England, Chicago, New York, and Florida. Apparently, he was really proud of the fact he owned a house, 2 cars, and a motorbike, and he should be. When you're a younger person, unless your parents have written the check, dear God, I wish my parents had written the check for my first house and my car, and so on and so forth. I say that, I haven't even got a car these days. The point is, it would be very nice, wouldn't it, to be able to have somebody else pay the bills. But if you haven't had that, and in fact, you've ended up as a really young man having a house, 2 cars and a motorbike, you have a right to be a bit braggy about it because it shows that you are independent, you are motivated, you are ambitious, and that you have got your ducks in a row. And his dating profile said that Wilson was looking for a woman who could be girly girl, but wouldn't be afraid to put her hair up and jump on the back of his motorcycle, which is kind of exciting to imagine, isn't it? That this is a guy out there who's thinking, well, I want him to be feminine, but not at a cost to having fun and getting engaged in my activities. And Megan's impressed. And also, Wilson was 6'3", he was lean. He was exactly what she was looking for. They made a connection online almost instantly, and at that point they decided they were going to meet in person. So on the 8th of June 2014, Megan just finished her shift at work at this point. Wilson asked her to meet him at work. He was apparently working the graveyard shift at the Mayport Naval Station, and you can imagine that spontaneity is exciting. And so many people in the dating world online put everything out there as if it's all going to be amazing and spend time chatting to you online. And then when it comes to actually connecting in real life, it doesn't happen. But he's straight there. He's being spontaneous. It's a bit impetuous, but it's fun. And that first date's very impromptu, but they apparently spoke for hours. And Wilson showed her around the helicopter hangar on the base, which must be so exciting because it's not a place that most of us would ever get the opportunity to see. And also it validates him. Just think about that. Psychologically, we don't know who we're meeting. We can create a picture of a possible date. We can arrive there and we can endure something wholly different to what we've expected. And also, how many times do we hear about love cons? Somebody presents to be somebody amazing and you get to know them a little bit and you're believing the hype because it seems that they seem to know what they're talking about, but you haven't got evidence for it. And then it turns out that they didn't have the job that they said that they had. They didn't have the life that they said that they had. And actually they were still living in the mum's basement. That happens all the time. So the very fact that she's going to meet him and he's presenting her with reality, yes, this is my job, that's why I've got access to this place, that's going to give her a real sense of validation that this guy has great potential. And she's even allowed to go inside one of the helicopters, so she knows that he's the real deal. And she loved the experience. Apparently she was smitten pretty much straight away. And bear in mind what I was saying before, she's had a pretty tough time growing up, particularly at school. She's massively loved by her family, But she's felt isolated to some degree, and suddenly this guy is making her feel special, and the relationship progresses really quickly. That's what happens when we have vulnerabilities, because we are looking for something to fill that gap, fill that space, and he presents her with that possibility. And within 2 months of dating, Meghan and Wilson move in together. Now, she was sad to be moving out of her dad's house because she is so close to this man. And I will tell you now that there is a moment in this video that just examples the kind of man she had been brought up by. Because I don't pretend to know Meghan's father, but his actions speak in a way that no words could. And it is clear the devotion that he has to his family is just absolutely incalculable. It genuinely is. Infinite is the word that should be used, essentially. So to leave him will be really challenging. She was really happy at home with him, but she's incredibly excited about her new relationship. And I guess her father's going to have some misgivings. It's an early relationship, but again, she's met somebody who seems like he's got all of this potential. He's got his head screwed on. So yeah, it's not ideal that it's so quick for him, but he will be thinking to himself, at least she's met somebody who's got a future and is decent. But again, first impressions are rarely correct. Now, by October 2014, so this is real quick, Meghan's pregnant. And she's not just pregnant with one child, she's pregnant with twins. She just turned 21. Now, that's a big change and transition because she's gone from being somebody who's working 3 jobs, who's going to college, etc. And all of a sudden she's in this relationship with this guy and she's now pregnant with twins. And on one level, that's amazing. It's exciting. It's new lives, new possibilities, new potential. It cements their relationship. But it's also something that can make you feel very trapped. And Meghan pretty early on begins to notice some pretty big red flags. She said on reflection, I was never good enough, pretty enough. I was never what he needed or wanted. So straight away, we are shown that he, from the pretty much get-go, is making her feel undermined, making her feel less than, making her feel not quite good enough. The idea that she feels unattractive when she's in a relatively new relationship, that comes straight out of the perpetrator's playbook. They want to ruin your self-confidence. They want to ruin your self-esteem. They want to make you feel totally invisible because that keeps you controlled. Now, Wilson also had a really short temper. He'd snap over really trivial things. She said, I remember one day we got into an argument because dinner wasn't done on his time and he threw a coffee table at me. Now, I get it. Most of us would want to say to her, leave now, leave. But again, you have to remember, when an incident occurs that feels out of the blue and distinct from your normal relationship, even if they've not been perfect with you, you can put that down to a mistake. You can forgive them because you think he's just having a really bad day, he won't do it again. This is how people end up in these really abusive situations. But she accepts that he's sorry and then finds out, well, it's not necessarily going to change his behaviour at all because it's not the only time he throws objects at Meghan. Now, less apparent to her at this point was Wilson's controlling nature. This is something that's going to escalate over time. But one of the things from very much the onset of the relationship is that he's really critical. Now, initially, she just brushed it off as him pushing her to be a better person. And if you think about gaslighting, which is often really insidious and subtle, I've written about this for quite a few newspapers. Gaslighting is done in a way that's going to undermine you and break your confidence down over a period of time. It's like chipping away at you so that you don't even realize when you became invisible or when you lost sense of who you are. That's because it is subtle. And one of the things that they will do is try to convince you that the way that they're acting is to help you. So yeah, I'm saying that you don't look great in those clothes, but the reason that I'm saying that is because I want you to look better, because I know that really somewhere in your heart and your head, you too want to be the best version of yourself. So you can hear how that criticism is framed as help. And then over time it will be, well, you know, you do look okay, but imagine how much better you'd look if you lost a stone, because you know you're gorgeous really, and you're letting yourself down by not actively seeking to have the body that you could have. Even though again, you can hear that as a, they're trying to help me. Actually, they're saying, I don't find you attractive at this moment in time. You're not the good version of you. And when somebody is doing that to you constantly, you're so confused. You're figuring out, do they love me? Do they like me? Do they find me attractive? Or Do they actually just want to inspire change in me because they want me to be happy with myself? And they'll frame it that way. I know that you would be happier if you did A, B, or C. So she's in that situation where she's thinking, he's just trying to inspire me to be the best version of myself. But the reality is he's just trying to make her a prisoner of his control by making her feel so disappointed with who she is that she requires him in her life to direct her accordingly. She said, if I left the house, I had to have my makeup on and a cute outfit on. We never left the house looking a mess. It was unacceptable. And again, the rigidness there, the inflexibility means that there are big problems. If we have a partner who cannot accept us with a messy bun like I've got and clothes that have got stains on, which I also have right now. I have a little girl who likes to get everything and just wipe it all over me. If I want to go out like that, well, that's up to me. It's not up to my partner to look at me and judge me. It's for my partner to understand that that's the way it is, because life is challenging and busy and we have to get on with it no matter what. If your partner is saying, I'm not even going to be seen with you unless you go and put on that nice outfit and do your hair, you are going to feel exhausted just existing. And that's another part of the perpetrator's playbook. They want you exhausted. They want you worried. They want you anxious. It means you're not thinking ahead. You're just dealing with the moment-to-moment experience. Now, going back to 2009, dating sites were apparently Wilson's favourite place to meet women. We know that that is part of the modern day era. And apparently he would often charm them with talk about his life in the Navy. And he'd go on about this desire for a lifelong companion. So very much speaking of females' language, most women, contrary to what you see in the news, want long-term monogamous partners. And actually it's the same for guys. So he knows how to speak the language of a woman looking for love. And that means that people are attracted to him. Brandy Johnson was somebody who dated Wilson for around 5 months in 2009. She said that he deceived her about even having another girlfriend, and that he was, during the time that she was seeing him, very impatient, but he never turned violent. And Brandy said, at the get-go, I thought he was a really great guy until I found his Facebook page that said he didn't have a girlfriend and instead had pictures of him and his other girlfriend on it. You can't even begin to imagine how humiliating, how aggravating, how rage-provoking that scenario would be. The feeling of betrayal, of finding a Facebook page where you're not included, but the guy that you're seeing is on there with another woman, and knowing that you've been taken for a ride, it's just devastating. She said the last time we spoke, he got upset I didn't respond to him fast enough, and I told him, get lost. Let's be clear, she had a really lucky escape, didn't she? And the very fact that he felt entitled to her time after he had treated her so horribly, what does that tell you about his ego? This is a guy who is highly egotistical. His mindset is, I can act how I want. I'm a catch at the end of the day. If you have a problem with that, that's your problem. You should still get in touch with me when I want you to get in touch with me, because at the end of the day, your needs don't matter. Now, court records also show that Wilson got married to a woman called Jamie Lewis in 2011. Unsurprisingly, considering what I'm talking about today, that relationship also deteriorated really rapidly, and he actually sent his wife into hiding because she was so scared of him. And Wilson chased Jamie and her 3-year-old daughter out of their Arlington home with a hammer during a late-night argument. Now, that is something straight out of a horror movie. Imagine the person that you think you're in a relationship with and believe wants the best for you, literally chasing you out of your home with a hammer. This is her husband. And this is somebody who wants her to know that he could really harm her. Because let's be clear, if you're a guy who's 6'3", which he was, if you're built well, which he was, you don't need a hammer. At the end of the day, your fist, your threats, that's going to be enough to scare a female, particularly when there is a child involved. So chasing her with that hammer is to say, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm going to kill you. And Wilson actually told her if anybody sent him to jail and ruined his career, he'd kill them. And I fully believe that that came from a place of truth. Jamie understandably divorced Wilson because he is a monster, and she did fortunately later remarry, and let's hope that she has had a successful and loving relationship with her new husband. Now, Danielle Johnson, it's amazing, isn't it, when perpetrators have this list? Because it just makes you think, my God, this is why men who go to prison for such piffly sentences for doing the most horrendous abusive things to women just go repeat and repeat and repeat. That's why we have these lists of women affected by domestic abuse, because these people don't change. But I digress. Danielle Johnson, she met Wilson in 2012. She was already a domestic abuse survivor, and this is what perpetrators are amazing at. They can just sniff you out. They know vulnerability, and they know how to play the game at making you feel like you're the absolute opposite to a violent perpetrator. She was at that juncture where she was thinking, please just give me someone who loves me and cares for me. And she had a young daughter, so she's hoping for a father figure. And she said that when she first met Wilson, he just made her feel like a schoolgirl, like a giddy schoolgirl. That feeling of butterflies in your stomach, and maybe that dream has come true. That fairy tale that so many of us fed when we're growing up was actually going to be her reality. She said he was the nicest person I've ever met. Very attentive, very interested in everything, wanted to know what I was doing every day. At that time, it didn't come across as possessive. Now, isn't that interesting? Because that is so true. And yet at the same time, it is a red flag. It makes sense that when somebody is love bombing you, making you feel very visible, making you feel really seen, making you feel really connected, that it feels just so good. But often that intensity is about making you feel that no one else has ever treated you this way, and therefore you are going to be able to connect with them really hard. And then it's going to be a challenge for you when they start taking away that love and care, because you're going to be wanting to backpedal to a place that you were in a good space with them. And that means that you are confused, and they need you confused. So she understandably doesn't see it as a red flag, even though it is one. She sees it as something that is genuinely cementing their relationship in the most positive way possible. But she said soon after that, he started to become controlling and abusive. About 1 month into the 8-month relationship, this is after she and her daughter had moved in with him, noticed the pattern. So he love bombs them, gets them into his home, makes them feel secure for a short period of time, and then starts to become abusive. She said that he actually tried to force her to watch gory videos. He forced her to engage in rough sex, which means that he was literally forcing her to have intimacy that she was not consenting to. So we all know what that makes him. Also, he demanded that she did domestic chores, that she cooked him dinner, that she ironed his uniforms, that she ran him baths. And if she ignored him, he'd attack her. He'd actually say, I'm from Jamaica, we demand respect. Just want to throw it in there, guys. If anybody says they demand respect, then I would argue you need to run a mile, because no one gets to demand respect. You earn respect. It's as simple as that. Demanding respect is about causing fear and making somebody act in a way that might not be conducive to their feelings, such as, I'm going to act like I respect you because I'm terrified you're going to hurt me. That isn't respect. That's fake, and it comes from fear. But he thinks that's okay. And he'd say, you don't walk away from your man when he's talking to you. I think most of us women can agree that that's not true. It doesn't matter what we feel about our partner. If they're annoying us, we're going to walk away from them. But again, isn't it evidence of the kind of person he is? I demand respect, and you don't do what you want to do. If I want you to do something differently, you're going to do it differently. So again, straight from the perpetrator's playbook. And Wilson repeatedly accused her of secretly seeing other men, which is likely to do with the fact that he's a cheater. So he doesn't understand that other people are loyal. He doesn't have loyalty. And therefore his expectation is that somebody is going to do to him what he does to them, which is false, but nonetheless is why he acts this way. He apparently broke numerous of her mobile phones, or he took them with him to work so she couldn't use them. He would criticize her appearance, apparently called her fat and ugly. Now, in April 2013, Danielle rightly tried to leave Wilson, and for daring to believe that she could make autonomous, independent choices, he attacked her, He dragged her by the hair into the street. This is while she is half naked, by the way. Now, at this point, the police charged Wilson with domestic battery by strangulation, but that charge was then dropped to a misdemeanor, which is crazy. Can we just let that sink in? She's half naked, she's being dragged around by her hair in the street, and it's dropped to a misdemeanor? That is not a misdemeanor. That is a serious assault. Now, even though Wilson is the violent perpetrator in all the relationships that he has, that doesn't mean that all the women didn't learn to fight back. In fact, one woman who remains anonymous was his girlfriend before Meghan. She actually met Wilson in the summer of 2013, and she said he had all the nice things you would go down the checklist for. Good job, nice house, nice car, no kids. He appeared to be very much a gentleman. But less than 2 months after they started dating, Wilson demanded that she perform domestic chores, monitored her phone, would grab her wrists so that she couldn't leave the house. She broke up with him, the right thing to do, but then they'd get back together periodically. Apparently had a really effective way of manipulating her. She said, still to this day, I can't tell you why I continued to go back. Well, I think most of us can understand it, because at the beginning, it was amazing. And then he's going to promise it's going to go back to that beginning. And you just think, well, maybe we can. Or he's so manipulative that he convinces you to think that you didn't behave as well as you could have. And if you change and he changes, it will all be fine. People will promise the world and deliver none of it because they just want the control back. They want to control the narrative. It's not even about the relationship. It's just that sense of no one has a right to change my world. Only I have a right to do that. Now, in February 2014, Wilson tries to stop her from leaving his house. But this woman carries a gun for protection, and she actually hid the weapon under her arm when Wilson attacked her. At this point, he throws her on the ground, and she thinks, I'm not having this. So she fires the gun once, and she hit Wilson in the groin. She then called 911. And she actually stayed close as the police arrived. She's not trying to get away. She knows that she shot someone, but she also knows why she shot someone. It was absolutely in self-defense. There was a grown-ass 6'3" man who's just thrown her to the floor, and this is one of many violent assaults. But at this point, in spite of the fact that clearly she had a right to shoot him, all I will say is it's really sad it didn't go in the head. I genuinely mean that as well, because what I'm going to tell you story-wise today would never have occurred, and let's be clear, he's not exactly an example of a good human being. But instead, she gets charged with attempted murder. Yes, the woman who's getting violently attacked, who uses her gun to defend herself, is now charged with attempted murder. Now, fortunately, Jacksonville defense attorney Mitch Stone was absolutely able to convince the prosecution that she had acted in self-defense, so the charges got dropped a few months later. Now, this incident did actually cause severe nerve damage to one of Wilson's legs. Genuinely could not have happened to a nicer guy. It's such a shame that it didn't affect both of his legs and maybe both of his arms, because then he wouldn't have been able to abuse women as often and as happily as he seemed to do. So all of these women before Meghan have left him because of this abusive behaviour. And what you'll note is at the very beginning, he wasn't being violent. That's something that's escalated over relationships and over time. And that's because his conscience hasn't actually got the consequence and memo, which is maybe if you stop beating these women up, they might choose to stay. Instead, his mindset says, well, these women have left, I need to control them and be more abusive to them to stop them leaving. That's how his brain is working. He isn't getting the feedback that says you need to take responsibility and accountability for the kind of human being that you are. You're the problem. He's just thinking to himself, maybe if I control them even more, maybe if I make them even more confused, maybe if I make them feel that there's absolutely no way they can safely leave me, I will always have a partner, which is so warped, but so evident from his actions. Now, Meghan attempts to leave the relationship in 2015, February of that year. She's 5 months pregnant at this point, and she's had enough. She packs up her things, she goes to her dad's house, a place of safety, a place where a good man will look after her. Now, of course, Wilson does what we expect, immediately begins to beg for her back. He says, I'll change. I'll absolutely be the best partner in the world. Listen, Valentine's Day is coming. I want you to have a really special day with me. I'm going to make it super important for us both. And she hadn't been in a serious relationship before. She hadn't ever celebrated Valentine's Day with a partner. So it's alluring, and she's hopeful, and she thinks maybe he's learnt his lesson. So she agrees to move back in with him. Now, during this time, Wilson also had his 13-year-old sister move back in, and this did cause some strain in the relationship. Apparently, Wilson was also super strict with his sister, didn't let her do anything. She was just allowed to go to and from school, and that would mean that she'd be in situ all the time, which makes a little bit of independent time with your partner all but impossible. Now, Meghan is pregnant, as I've said, and she's also put on bed rest quite early in her pregnancy, which is really frustrating for any woman who's been there. I have been there, and you just feel like your freedom is curtailed. And even though you know there's a high risk to your baby, which is why you've got to stay on bed rest, it is really exhausting. So you can add that as a further stressor. And bear in mind, he likes women to be chained to the kitchen sink. So that's not going to wash well with him either. And that's going to increase tensions in the house as well. But we get to the happy event. The 8th of June 2015, and Meghan has her twins. They're born prematurely at 33 weeks, but nonetheless, they arrive safely. This is 1 year after their first date. So this has happened quickly. To end up with twins within a year of actually meeting the partner that you're with, it's gonna have a lot of pressure additionalized, because let's be clear, you still don't really know each other that effectively. Now, both of the twins were girls, and they were called Hayden Rose and Caden Reese. They actually went by the middle names Rose and Reese, but really beautiful. And you can imagine that she was a twin and is a twin, and that's going to make you feel like just nature has repeated. And there you are, going through exactly what your own parents went through. And when you have a baby, even when it's in imperfect situations, you have hope. You're thinking it's a new beginning and a new start. And bear in mind, Meghan is a good person. She's a loving person. So she's going to be investing in her babies 100%. But as we see in so many cases of violent perpetrators, after her twins are born, he escalates the abuse. And the reason that we see this, where perpetrators are concerned, is they really don't like any attention being taken from them. The fact that there are two babies who require being cared for by the mother in particular, that doesn't wash well with them. They feel that they are the most important person in the world. And even though it's their own children who require the mother for survival, they're not concerned, because they don't have that level of connection that you or I would have with our own children. They're devoid of that connection because it's all about them. And just to put this into context, Wilson didn't even allow Meghan to stay in the NICU, which is the intensive care unit for children. So instead, he thought that she should be at home with him, even though she absolutely wanted to be there with them 24/7. And you can imagine, can't you, that when you've got twins who are in special care and you're likely breastfeeding, you want to be present with them so that they feel that safety. They've come out of your womb and all of a sudden they're in this strange environments with drips and nose feeds and all the things that go on in NICU. And you just want to be present to do skin to skin. And when they cry, you want to be the person there to comfort them. But no, he insists that she's at home. And she's being constantly pressured about staying in shape. Literally 3 days after she has the girls, he says, "Are you going to lose the weight?" 3 days! I mean, you're exhausted. You're scared because you're dealing with kids in NICU. You're adjusting to being a mother. The last thing you're thinking about is getting in to your clothes. You just want to wear sweatpants and try to appear like you can think more than 3 words at a time, because it's really hard work. She said, "I only gained 30 pounds with twins. I wasn't that big. In fact, Meghan, you weren't big at all. You were just a woman who had been pregnant with twins and given birth. And you should have had a man who afforded you the gratitude of what you've been through. You've presented him with 2 beautiful babies. Your figure should be the last thing on his mind." But again, He's not about reality. It's all about fantasy for him. He wants a life that seems amazing, even if it isn't. And he wants you to appear in that picture he's directing exactly as he chooses to direct you. And this means that he is even more angry because he's got other things to critique. So he gets more aggressive. He throws a tablet at Meghan. He forces her to have sex with him. And again, that's not consenting. So this guy is quite happy to take a woman against her will. He'd actually hold her down if she said no. And on a few occasions, she woke up to him having sex with her. It's rape. It's as simple as that. It is rape. If a man is forcing you to have sex, even if that's your partner, it's rape. If you wake up in the middle of the night and somebody's having sex with you, it's rape. And women find it really hard to acknowledge that because they feel that somehow a man has got permission to intimately connect with her, even when she doesn't want it because she's in a relationship with him. And it's so confusing because they feel all of these horrible feelings because of what's happened to them, but they don't feel entitled to do anything about it. And at the same time, of course, he's trying to confuse her by being nice at points. He buys her a car, but then he won't let her use it unless he approves of her using it. So he would just control when she has access. So he may as well not have bought it her at all. It's just another thing to hit her over the head with control-wise. He also frequently confiscated Meghan's phone. And she knows this is wrong. She's been brought up by a really good man. She's been brought up by a father who adores her, who's not been violent towards her. But she's also been brought up in a religious household, and even though her parents have divorced, that doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of blueprint within her that says be loyal, stay with your partner, work at it, you've got children. And one of the motivators for her staying was that she felt that she didn't want her girls to have to split their time between two parents like she'd done as a child. So that makes her feel like she wants to give it her best shot. So we get to the fateful and horrific day, 13th of November 2015. At this point, Meghan thinks to herself, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. I want to leave him. And there is something that has changed in her psyche, and she thinks, I'm going to go for good. I've had enough of the controlling behaviour. I've had enough of the mental and sexual abuse. And the final straw, it seems, was an incident when Wilson actually forced Meghan to have sex. And then midway, and just guys, take a deep breath. Midway, through forcing her to have sex, he actually takes his phone out and FaceTimes her father. The humiliation level, the violation level of that action is just indescribable. And Meghan was devastated. She managed to throw the phone to the floor, but she was utterly humiliated. And the psychological pain that would cause someone, and also the manipulation and the messaging within what he does, is very powerful. Because firstly, it humiliates and embarrasses her. Secondly, it lets her know, hey, your father isn't safe. I will destroy you. I will happily destroy him. I don't have boundaries. And that really is something that makes an individual fearful, because you think to yourself, what is this person not capable of? And that's the right mindset to have. Because if somebody does something like that to you, it shows that they have no conscience and they have no care or compassion around you per se. We get to the evening of the 13th of November. Meghan at this point has done the very brave and courageous thing. She's packed her belongings and she is ready to go. Bear in mind, at this point, the twins are only 5 months old. Her dad, the lovely human being that he was, who's 49 at this point in time, so still a young man, he's standing outside her home because he wants to provide emotional support for her. And also, I imagine that he knows this guy's got some form and he wants to make sure his daughter is safe. And that instinct is powerfully correct because she isn't safe. Now, Meghan is doing what grown, mature people do in these situations where you're breaking up. She's talking about co-parenting with him. She's saying, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to work? When do you want to see the kids? And of course, for Wilson, who's always controlled the narrative and always controlled Meghan and has thought he'd got Meghan under the thumb and where he wanted, he's realizing, well, hang on, her dad's outside and now she's talking about co-parenting, so it's starting to get real. And remember all the prior experiences he's had with women. He's had a lot of scenarios where women have finally got the strength and elected to leave, and he doesn't like it. and he'll be feeling the rage of every single one of those scenarios, which he considers being abandoned by women, as opposed to realizing that he's the cause of the issues that led to women leaving. And during this conversation, Megan said he literally started to visibly shake. Now, when people are physically shaking, what we can say is, yes, fear will do that at times, but often it's the adrenaline, cortisol, where rage is concerned. Yes, it's an anxiety response, but it's because we're starting to get that red mist. We're starting to feel so incensed by somebody else's behavior that we literally can't control our shaking, because literally our extremities are being flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And he also starts to become very distraught because, again, what do perpetrators do in these situations? They make themselves the victim. I'm really sad. I can't believe you're leaving me. Please don't go. And so she is dealing with this onslaught of all these emotions. And she said that she was on the couch and that he had Reese, one of her daughters, and she had Rose. They were feeding them with bottles at the time. She said at this point, my things were packed into a truck outside and he just flew into a rage. Wilson then asks her in this rage, are we over? And Megan says, yes, which is correct. She's truthful. It is over. She's had enough. He then says, are you sure we're over? And Megan responded diplomatically, I would say, with, we are not meant to be in a relationship together. Now, I would actually argue that's a very grown and kind way to describe the feeling that she has, because actually, no, I don't want to be with you, you monster. You're a horrific example of a human being. But she holds back. She's very diplomatic and caring. She just says, we're not meant to be in a relationship together. Not, you are a horrendous example of a man, I want to run for the hills. No, just simply, we're not meant to be. Not, you're a terrible person, just, we haven't worked. Now, at this point, Wilson stood up, threw Reese on the couch. This is his 5-month-old daughter. That's dangerous, full stop, to throw a child on the couch. And then he goes to the closet. And you can imagine, at this point, Megan starts to realize that something terrible is going to unfold, because that closet is where he kept his firearms. He then returns with an AR-15 and he says to her, I'm going to murder your dad and you're going to watch, bitch. Can you imagine that moment where the whole world just becomes this vacuum of fear? When her father hears Megan scream, because understandably he's now got a gun, he's thrown her child on the couch, he's threatening to kill her father, he does what any loving, good, decent, heroic father would. He came running through the front door. Wilson immediately opens fire, and Travis, her father, keeps getting shot, but every time tries to push himself back up. At this point, after he has literally loaded a pile of bullets into Travis's body, he turns the gun on Megan and the daughters. And Megan recounted, at this point, I know we're going to die. What am I going to do? Battling an AR-15? She said she was hysterical and that she was absolutely 100% ready to die with her daughters in her arms, protecting them the best way she could. What blows my mind is that evil monster forced Megan to hold her beautiful twins while he shot and killed each of them. 5 months old. She spoke to her mum afterwards, and apparently she said, Mama, he killed them. He killed them in my arms. He made me hold them when he killed them. He made me watch. So Wilson shot at Megan and the twins. She was shot 7 times, mostly in the abdomen. In fact, her lungs and her kidneys were the only organs that were not pierced. And he also left her with a left leg and knee shattered. She lost her left eye and she was unable to walk. At this point, Wilson then turned the gun on himself and shot himself in the head successfully. At least we can say he wasn't going to wake up or take another breath, because that man did not deserve to breathe. As simple as that. In fact, every breath he took on this planet was a wasted breath as far as I'm concerned. Meghan said at this point, at the end, when everything had happened, I could hear my dad dying, and I was crying. She said she mustered the strength to drag herself across to her father, who was bleeding out over the floor, and she said, I told him, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was going to do this. And then she asked Travis, this incredible hero of her father, why he didn't just stay down? Why didn't he just play dead? And this is what absolutely examples the kind of human being that he is. He said, I wanted to take every bullet so there wouldn't be any more bullets for you and the girls. He knew he was sacrificing himself, and he did it willingly. I know that he was a religious man, and I 100% know that the gates will have opened for him with those kind of actions. Now, despite her absolutely critical injuries and the horror that she had just endured, Meghan managed to call for help. She called 911 and she managed to tell them, my ex-boyfriend shot me, my twins, my best friend, referring to her father. She said, please come. Emergency responders arrived really quickly, actually, and they immediately transported Meghan to UF Health Jacksonville. She had to undergo 5 life-saving surgeries just to stabilise the condition. Apparently, she bled out on the operating table 3 times. Now, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office started an investigation, and of course, that concluded that Wilson had committed a triple murder-suicide. A few weeks later, Travis Hiatt and his 2 beautiful 5-month-old granddaughters were buried in side-by-side graves in the Ponte Vedra cemetery. At least in eternity, he is their protector. That's the only thing that I can draw from this horror, that if anybody was to go with them to heaven and bliss, you would want Travis as that person, because what a hero he was. Now, of course, Meghan isn't just dealing with the loss of the man that she adores, her father, and those beautiful girls. She's dealing with her physical disabilities. She's dealing with the psychological horror and the trauma that she's been through, which is just incalculable and enormous. So her recovery is just long and it's arduous. And just to give you some insight, over the next 9 years, she went through 50 surgeries to address those horrifically extensive injuries. And those actual surgeries included muscle and tendon repairs, treatments to restore functionality to her limbs, and obviously she has to deal with the situation with only having one eye now, which again is going to change the world for her. And one of the things that happened most recently in late 2024 is that Meghan underwent a complex surgery to repair and rejoin muscles and tendons in her leg, which of course are crucial for her mobility. Initially, she couldn't walk. She relied on a wheelchair, she relied on a walker for mobility, but she's worked so hard. So through intensive physical therapy, rehabilitation, she's actually regained her strength and independence because she is her father's daughter. You know, when you have that kind of resilience, it's like part of that being able to bounce back in spite of. It seems that she certainly inherited that from her father, a man who sacrificed himself and would take all the bullets in the world to keep his children safe. And she is here refusing to let the man who killed her children and killed her father hurt her anymore, at least limit her any further, because she worked so hard to regain that strength, to regain that independence. And now this incredible woman, she walks without assistance. A 9-year journey, but she's done it. But of course, beyond those physical changes I've just talked about and challenges that she's experienced, Meghan's had to grapple with the profound emotional and psychological trauma. She's experienced anxiety, nightmares, panic attacks, all PTSD symptoms, of course. And apparently she's worked really hard in therapy. She's tried lots of different therapies. She's apparently found MNRI therapy to be the most effective. If you imagine not just working on a mental, emotional level, but like a physiological level, and trying to integrate and de-stress from traumatic events, as well as learning how to effectively survive in the most efficient way. It's kind of an integrative therapy, and she's obviously found that very effective. And another thing that Meghan has said has helped her heal, at least recover physically and to some degree psychologically, is the fact that she had a faith. She actually spoke to a paper and said, everyone needs to find hope in something. And my hope is that I will one day get to hug my daughters again, to see my father again. Oh, just, it breaks my heart, but it also gives me a real sense of hope. I suppose that people who don't have faith who will listen to this won't connect, and I completely respect that. That's perfectly all right. You know, some of us find hope in the fact that our life is beautiful, fleeting, and ends. But for others like myself, there is that image of my dad when my time comes. And I think a lot of us can connect with that, can't we? We can just connect with those feelings. And I also find it really beautiful that faith has obviously helped her with her physical crutches, the ones that she'll have had to use for mobility at times, but has also provided her with an emotional crutch, and one that has allowed her to heal with that feeling of support from a higher power. And she's incredible, because today Megan is working really hard as a violence prevention advocate. So she wants to help people in domestic violence situations understand that there are other ways of living and better ways of living. She's actually a project manager for the non-profit eGrab Foundation, and that aims to provide housing for domestic violence and human trafficking victims. So she has taken every moment of her pain, every moment of her grief, and she's turned it into something profoundly important. And there is nothing like lived experience. I think we can all agree that our lived experience means that we can empathize and sympathize and connect with people in similar situations better on the whole than people who have not been there. And I think that most of us who have been in situations with experts who clearly have never been through anything we've been through and yet are trying to be an expert sometimes really means we struggle to relate to them. And an academic experience, no matter how academic you are and how researched you are and how you think you're brilliant at what you do, if you haven't experienced things that have been highly traumatic, you don't get it. You just don't. There is something cerebral and visceral and painful and beautiful about experience. And of course, it can destroy us, but it can also form us and build us. And my God, has it built this woman? And she's got a new life. And life is interesting, isn't it? Because we go through transitions. At my age now, I feel like I've been here a second, and I feel like I've been here for a million years. And I think that so many of us relate to that. And that's because time is so difficult to comprehend. But if I'm really truthful and I reflect on my life, I've gone through different reinventions and reinventions, and I've gone through complete transitions in who I am and what I think and how I feel. And I've gone through journeys that, when I look at them, were enormous. Yes, now they feel like fleeting moments because of where I am now, but they were massive. So we go through these years of change and transitions into new decades, and we become who we're becoming in that moment, and we leave behind who we were then. But she has this new life, and she's absolutely yearning for another chance of motherhood, and God, pray that she is going to be granted that. She's 31 years of age now, so she's still a very young woman. She's moved to Texas, and she met her husband, Joseph Johnson, and she'll soon learn from doctors whether she's going to be able to conceive naturally or if she's going to need IVF. And as somebody who, as you all know, if you come to my channel regularly and know who I am, my children are all fertility babies. It is a very grueling process to go through the experience of finding out you can't have children naturally. And at least in the UK, it is free, at least initially, to get IVF. Don't get me wrong, it's very expensive in the long term when you want more than one child, but at least it is available in the UK when you first find out. It isn't in other places. And the very fact that she has been through all of this horror and she just wants a child that she has an absolute right to, but now she's going to have to pay for it. And she's not obviously earning a massive amount of money because she's vocational. She cares deeply about other people. And you always, when you care deeply for other people, get paid less than the average person because your vocation and your soul makes you do it. She's actually started a GoFundMe to help with the cost of IVF. I have linked it below. I am donating to it. I would say if you have a spare £5, please do. If you don't, of course, don't feel any pressure. But if we all just go ahead and donate a little bit, then we can make her dream come true. And my God, if anybody deserves that, she does. Also, just to put this into context, in states like Texas, the average cost of a single IVF cycle ranges from $12,000 to $15,000. It's very similar in the UK. I can testify to that because I've had quite a few. And that actually excludes the medications, which are also really expensive. That can additionalize another $4,000 to $6,000 per cycle, guys, per cycle. And believe me, it can take many cycles IVF-wise to conceive a child, and sometimes you don't. They are also considering adoption, which we'd imagine for somebody like Megan who's got a massive heart. But something I didn't realise is that adoption also can come with really significant expenses. So in Texas, the average cost of adoption ranges from $60,000 to $65,000. That literally blindsided me. Again, in the UK, there are going to be some costs because you're going to obviously bring a child into your home, but the idea of it costing a lot of money to actually adopt is something very foreign to me, unless you were actually adopting from another country, which is very, very expensive. But like I said, you want her to have children. So if we can make that possible and contribute to that dream becoming a reality, I would really like to do so. She said, Joe and I would like to adopt a few children who lost their main caregiver to domestic violence. There's that level of understanding that they wouldn't otherwise get. Could she be any more inspirational? Is it just me? But could she be any more inspirational? I don't even think I could have lived. Everyone's different. We never truly know our strength until we're faced with certain situations. But I honestly cannot imagine getting up another day, let alone doing 9 years of intensive rehabilitation, let alone turning my life to helping others, if I had literally had my beautiful twins killed in my own arms. And yet she's done it. Now, Danielle Johnson, going back to one of the individuals that Wilson had a relationship with, that's the woman who shot Wilson, and I wish she had killed him. She actually said that the Navy needed to do more to prevent him from harming anyone else. She said that after the murder-suicide, there was a Naval Criminal Investigative Service agent who contacted her to actually ask about her prior experiences with Wilson. And she said, "We need to know how it got this far." And I said, I told you all 2 years ago that it was going to get this far. I said it should have been stopped 2 years ago. So the woman who actually shot him said he slipped through so many cracks. It's ridiculous. She'd obviously tried to alert people to his murderous potential, and she was 100% right. Now, Lieutenant Commander Ed Early, who's a Navy spokesman, he said that Wilson's Navy command took appropriate administrative action when notified of the 2013 and 2014 incidents. Apparently said this included counselling, but they declined to release details. So if you've got nothing to hide, why not be transparent? It really drives me crazy. Because if they've done everything right, they've got nothing to keep back, because if they actually put it out there, it would infuriate the public. Well, why not put it out there? Because otherwise you leave us all questioning what you knew and did nothing about. But we see this all the time in authority, don't we? We see those in power withholding information that could protect us. And in this case, 3 people were horrifically murdered. 2 little girls were denied their lives right at the beginning of their lives. And all those women, that litany of examples I gave you of the domestic abuse that they experienced, they're only the ones that we know about. There'll have been more. That same commander said, "Domestic abuse and violence is a serious national public health issue. The military is not immune." No, it isn't. So if the military is not immune, why don't you ensure that the public know the details about how there were failures in this case on the Navy's part? And then maybe it can heal that situation instead of just adding and exacerbating it by failing to acknowledge what needs to change. This has been one of those cases that took my breath away on every single level. Researching it, I'm not going to lie, was really challenging, because I can't believe people walk the streets and can do this to children, let alone to their partners, let alone to their partners' fathers. And I know I cover harrowing cases all the time, but there is just something about this one that really gets me. And I think part of that is to do with looking at a woman like Megan and thinking, I don't know if I could be such an example, such a shining light, because there is something profoundly unusual, in my opinion, about her strength. And it reinforces my faith, and it makes me want to work harder at who I am. And it reminds me that for every darkness in this world, for every darkness, there is incredible light. And so even though this is a terribly sad story and one involving such incredible pain and loss, it's also about triumph over adversity. It's about faith above everything else. And it's about a belief that there is always hope. And I wish Meghan hope. And a lot of kids, a lot of children. I hope you've found this case interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, I really would. And yet again, here we are talking about the fact that lessons should be learned, right? But they're always too late, aren't they? Hope you've connected with what I've talked about. I hope you, if you've had experiences of domestic abuse, feel that you too can draw strength from somebody like Meghan. And I would love to know your thoughts as ever. Take care, guys. I'll see you again next time.